Hi, hello. Hello to everyone who is able to watch live. This is the fourth session of the read along for my book. It's called The Funny Thing About Forgiveness, What Every Leader Needs to Know About Improv, Culture, and the World's Least Favorite F Word. Did I just forget momentarily the name of my own book? Yes, I did. That is what happened just now. But I have invited the folks who have purchased the book, who are reading the book right now, to read a chapter a week together. I don't think that's really happening. I think people are just kind of reading at whatever pace they want. But I've invited folks to participate in this read along where even if they're not reading a chapter a week, that each week they can send in questions or thoughts or reflections on a chapter a week, and then I'm responding in these live streams. So this week it's chapter 4, and chapter 4 is called Freedom Through Forgiveness. So I actually wanted to change things up a little bit this week and start with reading an excerpt from the book, because this chapter is actually, it is my favorite chapter in the book. And when I was rereading some of it just in preparation for this, because you might think that that sounds crazy, but I don't remember every single thing that made it into the final cut. And so I was just sort of reviewing, and I just, if there's anything about my work that I ever want people to remember, it's this stuff, because this work to me is so much bigger than any one company, or like, honestly, my deepest goal with this book is not to build, definitely not a coaching business. That's one thing that I have learned in the last couple of years, and not even a consulting business. I love getting to work with companies, and I love talking with people about what's going on. But this mindful improv thinking, when it comes to forgiveness, this is so much bigger than any one company. These ideas are things that can change the way we elect leaders in this country. They can change foster care. They can change the way that we police, the way that we provide support and accountability, the way that we empower and equip people to be lifted out of poverty. Like, mindful improv thinking can change everything. It can change everything. And so much of that just starts with each of us doing this own work in our hearts. Like, forgiveness is what equips us to have an impact in the world. So I just wanted to start this time by reading an excerpt from the book, and then I will get to questions and reflections and things. Okay, so again, it's chapter 4, and it's called Freedom Through Forgiveness. Let's continue on our journey toward a new understanding of forgiveness as an empowering, healing act of self-discovery and self-actualization. Forgiveness is the single most important soft skill a leader could ever master, and it gets a bad rap. Many people believe that until you can recall the most painful chapters of your story without feeling rage, despair, shame, resentment, etc., then forgiveness must not have happened. I challenge that notion. I'm not interested in training my brain not to be outraged by injustice. As a foster adoptive parent who has been through trauma therapy with my then 4-year-old daughter, I can vouch for the fact that some things should always be infuriating. But I'm also not interested in giving away all my mental real estate to the worst aspects of my story or anyone else's. Constant focus on what's awful does nothing to create more of what's beautiful in the world. What does help me work as an agent of good in the world and in my own life is being free of the limiting beliefs that pull me into shame, pessimism, and suspicion of others. That's what this chapter is about, because that's what forgiveness is about. To me, forgiveness is when my hurt is no longer writing my story. I know this F word is kerfuffling. I want to be explicit about what forgiveness is and isn't, what forgiveness is not. The process by which we absolve someone of wrongdoing, the ability to remember an injustice without anger or sadness, interchangeable with the words, "that's okay." The peaceful destination you reach after years of unpacking your hurt, a moral obligation or the means to becoming a better person. Often as children, we're taught that forgiveness is what happens once you've worked it out with your sister. You return each other's Barbies, and then mom watches intently as you offer apologies through clenched teeth. In these exchanges, we're inadvertently taught that forgiveness is the absence of anger, that it's the service rendered in exchange for an apology. Forgiveness is treated as some kind of binding agreement to move on. Here's what I know. Forgiveness is about freedom, not absolution. Forgiveness has nothing to do with whether or not you're a good person, but it has everything to do with whether or not you're a free person. So I love forgiveness. I love talking about it. I love working it out with people. And so to that end, let me respond to some questions about chapter 4. Okay, first of all, you say forgiveness does not require an apology. That makes sense for the individual process you're presenting here about forgiveness. But what about outward forgiveness in a relationship? Can you move forward in a relationship without an apology? So this makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it's really important to point out that forgiveness is this internal process. The entirety of chapter 4 is dedicated to teaching these steps of how forgiveness can really work, the logistics of forgiveness, I call it. And so that is an inside process, and you don't need anybody else. It requires no confrontation with anybody else to do that work and set yourself free from the pain and the limiting beliefs that come from painful experiences. What this question is really getting at is reconciliation, which is a different thing. And it's beautiful and it's important. And I am deeply an advocate of reconciliation in a lot of situations. But that is a different thing. And I think it's important to point that out, because forgiveness is about you and your ability to know that good, wonderful, beautiful things are possible in your life, and that you are capable and worthy of having an impact in this world. And forgiveness is what just frees you up mentally and emotionally to do that work. And reconciliation is about maintaining a relationship, reconnecting and healing a relationship with another person. So, in this sense, let's talk about the idea of an apology. One of the things that I point out in this chapter is that when we make our ability to forgive someone contingent upon receiving an apology, we're really putting ourselves in a damaging situation, because very often what we're really saying is like, I'm holding all of this anger. And when you're holding all of that anger and that hurt, very often we can't receive the apology anyway. I mean, I watch this happen 17 times a day with my kids, where one kid has calmed down in their room. Now they're ready to apologize. The other kid is still mad as a hornet. And it doesn't matter what the little brother has to say or the older sister has to say, they have committed to how they feel about the situation. And that's understandable. And I try to advocate for all feelings being acceptable in this house. But it's a real shame if your ability to move on is contingent upon somebody else's ability to offer you an apology that you find acceptable. You're assuming that you'll be able to accept it, and that's often not how it works. But the other thing is, let's talk about this idea of reconciliation. So I do think that an apology is necessary. A sincere apology is necessary if we want to reconcile a relationship. But I also think it's really important for forgiveness to come first, that forgiveness is the prerequisite for that reconciliatory situation. That if we want reconciliation to happen, we have to do that forgiveness work for ourselves first. And, the reason for that is that that's kind of you paving the way to be trustworthy. Here's what it is. An apology in that reconciliation experience is really about trust. It's about you figuring out, is this person trustworthy? Do they see that what they have done is hurtful? Do they understand how not to do that again? That's what the apology really is, But that forgiveness work, that has to come from you. And I think that it's really important for forgiveness work to happen first, because then you walk into the reconciliation conversation and you've done that work. You've healed your half of the hurt. You've healed your half of the relationship, and you're not holding that resentment and that suspicion toward that person. So then you walk into that reconciliation conversation, you are ready to listen. You are ready to understand. You are ready to invite this person onto a growing journey with you, That's the power of forgiveness. That way, when this person offers an apology that is sincere, that's their part of it. That's their humility. That's their vulnerability. And now you've both created the opportunity for trust. You've both done your own building of that trust foundation. So I think the answer to my answer to this question is that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. An apology is not necessary for forgiveness, and it can't be necessary for forgiveness. But it is necessary for reconciliation, but forgiveness has to come first. Do the forgiveness work and then walk into the reconciliation opportunity. The stories in this chapter are so vulnerable. Thank you for sharing them. I don't think I could ever do that. So they are really vulnerable. And I was talking with a friend of mine earlier this week about how much time I spent on this chapter just really deciding if I was willing to be this open and honest with strangers. But part of it is I've done this forgiveness work. So I have learned from my future friend, Brene, that the difference between vulnerability and oversharing is whether or not you have done that work for yourself. Because when you do that work to heal those relationships, to heal your, I'm going to say vibration towards someone. But when you do that work, then, you've already processed it. It's not raw. It doesn't have its hooks sunk into you, And if you're sharing out on social media and all this stuff about painful situations and you haven't processed them, you're really opening yourself up to a lot of hurt. You're not necessarily helping other people, and you're making yourself vulnerable to, other people's raw reactions to something. And so, that can be considered oversharing. But anyhow, the reason that I say all that is that I felt like it was important for me to really share real stories from my life, because what I never want to make it seem like is that I have some, academic understanding of forgiveness for everybody else. What I would never want to happen is for my work to be meaningful for other people and never to get into my heart and infiltrate my thinking and my life. I need this work. I need this work. And so much of it has been born out of my own experience of coming through painful things, and so I wanted to share those. But I'm glad they're meaningful. I hope they're meaningful for other people too. And there were a bunch of comments about the stories in this chapter. They are vulnerable. They're vulnerable. And even some people that have known me for a long time didn't know some of these things. So anyhow, thank you for that. Thank you for appreciating that. And also, I just have a thought about that. I could never do that. I could never do that. Yeah. You don't have to. It's not like a requirement for the healing journey to, share publicly about painful things that you've been through. But the other thing that's so beautiful about forgiveness work is that it absolutely does make it possible. It makes it possible for your healing process to get to the place where, if you wanted to, because it's only an opportunity, certainly not an obligation, but if you ever wanted to, and if it ever felt healing and hopeful and like a source of connection with other people to share what you've been through, to share your story, this is the beauty of forgiveness work. It makes it so that it absolutely is possible. Okay. Next, what if you're at two different stages in the process of forgiveness at the same time with a specific person? Like separate hurtful experiences involving the same person. Yeah, I get that. That's definitely possible. And that has happened to me before as well. So just to be very clear about this, if you haven't read the chapter, there's a visual aid in here modeled after the stages of change that I call the stages of forgiveness. And it just explains, in my experience, again, it's not a scientific tool. I'm not purporting to, have done research with millions of people about it, but it's just a tool that I developed for myself that I'm sharing in the book. I've taught it to clients. They have taught it to their friends. So it has been meaningful in my circle, and I'm offering it to you as a gift. And I hope that it's helpful. Um, so it just shows like the different stages along this journey and how you can identify like where are you at in your process. I think when I introduce it, I say something to the effect of, sometimes when we imagine being reconciled in a relationship with someone, we can say, I'm just not there yet. I'm just not there yet. But I don't think many of us would have a good answer to the question, where are you then? If you're not ready to move forward, if you're not ready to be free from this, where are you then? And so that's what this visual aid seeks to do. Give us clear pinpoints on that process. Like, where am I in this process of forgiveness? So the question is, what if you're at two different stages with the same person? Then where are you? So more than one thing has happened to us. And this forgiveness tool is intended to be useful for each situation. It's not like the state of forgiveness. More than one thing has happened to you. And so you're naturally going to have different feelings about the different things that you are processing. When it's the same person that is involved in these situations, what I have found helpful is to focus on whichever situation I'm further along in the process with. So if I'm already at a stage of curiosity, if I'm already at a stage of like further along in the process, I find it helpful to just keep working the stages there and then work my way closer and closer to love. Because when I do that, love is such a powerful, powerful emotion, feeling, verb. It's such a powerful thing. And it just has a way of flowing in such a helpful and healing way into other aspects of the story. So my advice in that situation would be just keep working the steps, keep working the process on whichever situation you are further along with, because there will be insights that are meaningful to you in how you think about the other situation with that person, simply by working those steps and getting from curiosity, down into confrontation and eventually into love. And it will help you to continue your process for the other situation as well. Okay, so that is, those are the questions for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this is meaningful. And if you haven't gotten a copy of the book yet, the whole gist of it is, how do we be the people that we mean to be consistently? I think the answer to that is forgiveness. That's the whole hypothesis of this book, is that whatever it is that we are trying to achieve, whatever we're trying to be about as leaders, and leaders in the broadest sense, leaders of families, leaders of churches, leaders of movements, not just leaders of companies. But whatever it is that we're trying to be about, we will be able to do those things consistently when we identify where our opportunities for forgiveness are and we get proactive about doing them. One of the things I say in this chapter is that you don't have to wait to feel forgiving-ish. And what I mean by that is that it's easy when you start to see someone doing some work on themselves and you're like, oh, okay, I think maybe they're starting to get it. I think maybe they're starting to like grow and understand. Then maybe you can open your heart up to releasing some of the toxic venom that you're holding towards them. But again, that's surrendering a whole lot of control over to that person. So we don't have to wait for those feelings. We can get proactive about forgiveness. And when we do that, we can find all kinds of inner strength, inner wisdom, inner clarity, freedom. That is why this chapter is called Freedom Through Forgiveness. So if you haven't picked up a copy of the book yet and this idea is intriguing to you, you can find it at Amazon. It is available in hardcover or paperback. I recommend paperback because the hardcovers are taking a very long time to get delivered. It's also available in ebook. So you can find it. Just go to Amazon.com and look for The Funny Thing About Forgiveness, and you can find it there. I will be back on Friday at 12 p.m. to do another live stream answering questions about Chapter 5. So if you are reading along or you've already read it, but you want to go back and review and maybe share some thoughts or some questions about Chapter 5, you may do so either through the form on my website, andbeyondimprov.com/funny thing about forgiveness. There is a web form there where you can submit questions. You can send them into my email, andrea@andbeyondimprov.com. Or you can feel free to private message me on any of the social media platforms where we normally see each other. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys on Friday. Bye.